The hall was silent as the will was being read. The human man named Daniel sat in the front row, his hands shaking slightly. He had come only to honor his alien friend who had passed away. He expected nothing, no gift, no memory beyond the bond they once shared. But as the lawyer, a tall alien with a voice that echoed through the chamber, began to speak, the entire crowd leaned closer. Daniel's friend was not just anyone. He had been a warrior, a respected figure, and one of the richest men on the colony. His death was sudden, and whispers of foul play had already spread. Hundreds of aliens filled the room, most of them waiting to hear how the fortune would be divided. The alien's family sat proudly, already certain that wealth, ships, and lands would belong to them. The lawyer cleared his throat and spoke. According to the will, all fortune, all ships, and all property are to be inherited by... He paused, his eyes moving across the crowd. The tension in the room grew heavy. Then he finished. Daniel Carter, the human. The hall erupted in shock. Some gasped loudly, some shouted in anger, and others whispered in disbelief. Daniel froze, his mind struggling to understand. He looked around and saw angry alien faces staring at him, their eyes full of hate and jealousy. He could hear them muttering, "A human? This must be a mistake. He cannot take what belongs to us." But the lawyer raised his hand and continued. The will is final, the fortune is his, and with it comes responsibility. Daniel is also entrusted with the care and protection of the widow of the deceased. The words struck him like lightning, his breath caught. He turned and saw her for the first time. The widow, sitting in silence at the corner of the hall. Her beauty was striking, tall, elegant, with glowing skin that shimmered under the lights. Her long hair fell across her shoulders like silver, and her eyes, though filled with grief, were sharper than any blade. For a moment, Daniel forgot to breathe. She looked at him, and he felt as if the entire hall had vanished. Her gaze was cold, filled with suspicion, as though she wanted to say she did not want this. She did not want him. The whispers in the hall grew louder. How could the great warrior leave his wife in the care of a human? One alien spat, another laughed bitterly. Perhaps the warrior lost his mind before he died. Others shook their heads, already plotting in silence. Daniel could feel the weight of their hatred pressing against him. He wanted to stand and say it was a mistake. He wanted to tell them he did not want their fortune, their lands, or even their power. He had only come to honor a friend, not to replace him. But deep inside, he remembered the last conversation he had with his friend. The alien had gripped his hand with weak fingers and whispered, "Take care of her. She is more than treasure, more than life itself." Now those words returned to him, heavy and haunting. The lawyer ended the reading and announced that the will was sealed and lawful. Guards entered the hall to ensure no violence broke out. But the eyes around Daniel burned with fire. He could see greed, rage, and the hunger for revenge in those alien faces. The widow finally rose from her chair. She walked with a grace that silenced even the loudest whispers. Her eyes never leaving Daniel's face. She stopped before him, looking down at him as though he were a stranger who had stolen everything from her. "You," she said softly, her voice filled with pain but also strength. "Why you?" Daniel had no answer. His lips parted, but no words came. He could only bow his head. His heart pounded, and he wondered if this was truly his friend's last wish, or if someone had forced this fate upon him. Around them, enemies whispered and plotted. Some left the hall with clenched fists. Others stayed behind, already forming alliances. Daniel felt it in his bones. This was not an inheritance. This was a battlefield, and he had just been thrown into the center of it. The widow turned and walked away without another word, leaving him with the stares of hundreds of aliens. The hall that had once felt like a place of mourning now felt like a trap. Daniel realized one truth as he stood there. The fortune was not a blessing. It was a curse, and every eye in the galaxy was now upon him. The crowd slowly left the hall, but Daniel remained seated for a while. His heart was heavy, his thoughts tangled. He had just inherited a fortune he never wanted, and more than that, he had been tied to a woman he had never met before. He could still feel the sharpness of her eyes, the way she looked at him as if he were an intruder in her life. Outside the hall, the alien city glowed under twin suns. Towers of silver reached the skies, and floating ships drifted between them. Yet Daniel could not admire the beauty. His mind replayed the widow's face over and over, her cold voice, her single question, "Why you?" echoed in his ears. Later that evening, he was summoned to the estate. The late warrior's home was a grand palace built on the edge of a cliff. The walls shone with crystal and gold, and guards stood at every corner. They looked at him with suspicion, their alien eyes narrowing. Clearly, they did not welcome him. Inside, he was guided through long corridors filled with ancient relics, paintings of battles, weapons of honor, and golden statues of alien kings stood proudly. Every step he took reminded him that he did not belong here. Finally, the guards led him into a great hall, and there she was. The widow stood near a window, looking out at the horizon where the twin suns touched the sea. Her gown shimmered in shades of silver and black, delicate jewels resting on her neck. She was more beautiful than anyone Daniel had ever seen. Her hair, long and flowing like strands of moonlight, fell across her back. Her skin glowed softly in the dim light, making her appear almost unreal. When she turned to face him, her eyes pierced him again. This time, however, there was no grief, only fire. "You do not belong here," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "My husband trusted you, but I do not. You think you inherited him, his lands, his fortune, his wife, but let me be clear. Nothing here is yours, not even me." Daniel lowered his gaze. He could not deny her words. "I never asked for this," he said quietly. "I never wanted your fortune or your hand. I only came to honor him, and now I am trapped in something I cannot understand." Her expression softened for a moment, then hardened again. She stepped closer, her presence overwhelming. "My husband was wise," she whispered. "He saw strength in you that I cannot see. Maybe you are not here for wealth, but I do not know if you are strong enough to survive what is coming." Daniel frowned. "What is coming?" She looked toward the dark horizon, her voice lowering. "Enemies, many. My husband had rivals, powerful lords who wanted him dead. They will not stop now. They will come for the fortune. They will come for me. And now, because of the will, they will also come for you." The words struck Daniel like a blade. He suddenly understood why his friend had chosen him. This was not about wealth or honor. It was about survival. His friend had known the widow would be hunted, and the only person he trusted to protect her was Daniel. The widow turned back to him, her eyes shining with a strange mix of pain and pride. "If you stay here, you will die," she warned. "If you leave, you will live, but you will abandon his last wish." Daniel felt the weight of her words. His chest tightened. He wanted to walk away, to return to his simple life, but deep inside, something stopped him. His friend's voice echoed in his mind. "Take care of her. She is more than treasure, more than life itself." Before he could answer, the doors of the hall burst open. A guard rushed in, his armor cracked, blood running down his face. "Assassins?" he gasped. "They are inside the palace." The widow's eyes widened. She turned to Daniel, her fire replaced by urgency. "This is only the beginning," she said. Daniel's fists clenched, his heart pounded. He was no warrior, but he would not let his friend's trust be broken. Not tonight, not ever. The widow looked at him one last time, her voice trembling. "If you truly wish to prove you are worthy of his trust, then protect me now." At that moment, Daniel realized the truth. This was not just an inheritance. It was a test, and the beautiful widow, though unwilling, was bound to him by fate, whether she hated him or not. Their lives were now tied together. Outside the hall, the sound of footsteps grew louder, weapons clashing in the distance. The palace was under attack. Enemies had come sooner than expected. Daniel had only seconds to choose, run, or stand and fight for her. He took a deep breath, his voice steady as he looked at her. "I promised him I would take care of you," he said. "And I will." The widow stared at him in silence, then nodded slowly, for the first time. Her eyes softened, not with trust, but with the smallest spark of hope. And then the doors behind them shook with the force of intruders. The heavy doors of the palace shook as if thunder rolled against them. The widow stood tall beside Daniel, her eyes sharp, her posture like a queen ready to face war. The guards rushed forward, drawing their energy blades. their armor gleaming faintly in the torchlight. Daniel's heart raced. He had no weapon, no armor, only his bare hands and the will of a promise. The doors cracked, and shadows spilled into the hall. Figures dressed in dark cloaks slid inside, their movements fast and silent. Their faces were hidden by masks, their weapons curved and glowing red. The air smelled of burning metal. Daniel felt the weight of death pressing closer with each step they took. One assassin charged forward, aiming straight for the widow. She didn't flinch, but Daniel moved instinctively, grabbing a fallen guard's blade. The weapon felt strange in his grip, heavier than he expected. Yet when the assassin's strike came, Daniel blocked it with a loud spark of energy. The shock pushed him back, but he did not fall. The widow's eyes widened, not at the danger, but at him. The human who should have run was standing in front of her. His hands shook, his body screamed with fear, but he did not break. Another assassin leaped. Daniel swung clumsily, the blade slicing across the attacker's arm. A cry echoed through the hall, and for the first time the assassins hesitated. The widow's voice rang out, calm and commanding. Protect the heir, protect the will. Her guards answered, their voices shaking but firm. They rushed into the battle, clashing with the assassins. Sparks filled the hall. The sound of metal on metal was deafening. Daniel fought beside them, every breath a struggle. He was not a warrior, but his promise gave him strength. He remembered his friend's dying eyes, the words he whispered, take care of her. And each time he raised the blade, those words burned inside him. Finally, after what felt like hours, the assassins began to retreat. Their leader, a tall figure with glowing crimson eyes, stepped forward. He pointed at Daniel and the widow, his voice deep and chilling. This is only the beginning. The human cannot protect what is not his. The fortune, the wife, and the power will all belong to us. Then, as quickly as they came, the assassins vanished into smoke, leaving broken bodies and blood across the floor. The hall fell silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. The widow stood still, her face unreadable. Daniel leaned on the blade, sweat dripping down his forehead. His arms ached, his chest burned, but he was alive. She walked toward him slowly, her silver hair flowing like water. Her voice was soft but strong. You fought like a man who has nothing to lose. Why? Daniel looked at her, his voice rough. Because I gave him my word, and because now they came for you, they will not stop. She studied him carefully, her eyes narrowing. There was no trust in them yet, but there was something else, a small spark of respect. They will come again, she said. And they will come stronger. You have made yourself their target. You are no longer just the heir, you are their enemy. That night, the palace became a prison of whispers. Guards doubled at every door. Spies were hunted in every corner. Yet Daniel knew the walls could not keep out shadows. Enemies were everywhere, waiting, watching. In the quiet hours of dawn, Daniel stood alone on the balcony overlooking the alien sea. The widow approached, her footsteps soft as silk. For a moment, they both watched the horizon, the suns rising together in fiery light. Then she spoke. Do you know why they hate you? Daniel shook his head. Because I am human? She turned to him, her eyes glowing in the sunlight. Because you are different, they cannot control you. You are not bound by their laws, their families, or their greed that makes you dangerous to them. Her words sank deep into him. He thought he was weak, an outsider. But now he realized being human was his strength. Suddenly, a messenger ran into the balcony, kneeling before the widow. My lady, news from the outer colonies. A bounty has been placed, a reward for the head of the human heir. Daniel's blood turned cold, the widow's expression darkened. They move faster than I expected, she whispered. Daniel clenched his fists. His life was no longer his own. He was marked, hunted. But when he looked at the widow, he felt the fire of his promise rise again. The enemies were in the shadows, stronger and closer than ever, and Daniel understood one truth. This inheritance was not about wealth, it was about war. The widow's final words that morning sealed his fate. If you wish to survive, human, you must become more than a protector. You must become a warrior. The suns rose higher, casting long shadows over the palace. and Daniel knew the battle had only just begun. The palace was quiet after the attack, but the silence was heavy. Every hallway seemed darker. Every shadow carried danger. Guards stood in pairs at every entrance, their eyes sharp, their hands never leaving their weapons. Daniel walked through the corridors, his mind restless. His body still ached from the fight, yet his spirit refused to bend. He knew the assassins would come again. They would not stop until either he was dead or the widow was taken. The thought filled him with dread, but it also lit a fire inside him. He could not walk away. His friend had trusted him, and now the widow's life was tied to his. That evening, he was summoned again to the grand hall. The widow stood waiting, her silver gown shimmering under the golden lights. She looked at him with cold eyes. But this time there was no anger, only something deeper, a quiet test. "You fought for me," she said softly. "But one battle does not make a protector. If you stay here, you must take this role seriously. You are no longer free. You are bound to me by his last wish. That is what the will demands." Daniel took a deep breath. "I did not choose this, but I will not run. If they come again, I will fight, even if it costs me everything." The widow studied his face. Her voice grew sharper. "You speak like a man who thinks courage is enough, but courage without skill is nothing. If you wish to protect me, you must learn to fight as my people fight. You must stand not only with words but with strength." She turned to one of the guards and ordered, "Take him to the training grounds." Daniel was led through the palace until they reached a wide open court. The floor was stone, scarred with marks of old battles. Weapons of every shape lined the walls, from swords glowing with energy to rifles humming with silent power. He picked up a blade, heavy in his hand, and faced the alien instructor assigned to him. The instructor was huge, a warrior with scales like armor and eyes like fire. "A human heir?" The warrior growled. "What a joke! You will not last 5 minutes here." Daniel raised the blade nervously. His grip was weak, his stance unsteady. The warrior struck fast, knocking him to the ground with one blow. Pain shot through Daniel's arm. He gasped but forced himself to rise. He swung again, clumsy and slow. The warrior laughed and struck him down once more. The widow stood at the edge of the court, watching in silence. Her expression unreadable. Daniel struggled to rise again, his knees shaking. His breath came heavy, but in his chest burned his promise. Take care of her. He forced his body forward, blocking another strike. His arms screamed with pain, but this time he did not fall. Hours passed. Daniel was cut, bruised, his hands bleeding. Yet he refused to surrender. The warrior finally stepped back, his voice grudging with respect. "He is weak, but not broken. Perhaps there is something in him after all." That night, Daniel sat alone, his body trembling. The widow came quietly, her footsteps light. She handed him a cup of healing liquid, its glow soft in the dark. He drank, the warmth spreading through his chest, easing the pain. She sat beside him but kept her distance. "You are stubborn," she said gently. "That is good. Stubborn men do not die easily, but stubbornness alone will not save you or me." Daniel looked at her. "Then teach me. I will not let them take you. I will not let him down." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, her coldness cracked. "You do not even know me," she whispered. "You risk your life for a stranger." Daniel shook his head slowly. "You are not a stranger, you are his wife, and you are the only piece of him left. Protecting you is the same as protecting him, and maybe it is more than that." The widow turned away, hiding her expression. For a moment, silence filled the room, but in her heart, something shifted. She still did not trust him fully, but she could no longer deny his determination. The next morning, word spread across the colony. Enemies were gathering in secret, preparing to strike again. The bounty on Daniel's head had doubled, and whispers of betrayal inside the palace grew louder. The widow called him to her side, her voice firm. "From this day forward, you do not leave my side. Not in the court, not in the palace, not even in sleep. If they want me, they must go through you." Daniel nodded. He had been given no choice. He was now her shield, her guard, her protector. The palace and the galaxy itself would watch every move he made. His human heart would be tested against alien cruelty. And in the shadows, unseen, The enemies sharpened their blades, waiting for the moment to strike again. The days after the attack passed in uneasy silence. The palace stood tall like a fortress, but Daniel felt no safety within its walls. Whispers of betrayal circled the halls. Some guards spoke in hushed voices. Some servants avoided his eyes. He could feel it. Someone inside was helping the enemy. Daniel trained every morning until his body shook with pain. He was bruised, cut, and exhausted. Yet he grew stronger. The warrior instructor who once mocked him now spoke with reluctant respect. The widow often watched from a distance. Her face calm but her eyes sharp. She never praised him, never spoke of trust, but she never turned away either. One night, Daniel stood on the balcony, staring at the alien stars. They glittered across the dark sky like endless eyes. He thought of his friend, of the promise he had made. His heart was heavy, not only with duty but with questions. Why had his friend trusted him with everything? Why had he left his widow in his care? What secret bound them all? The widow appeared behind him, her silver hair catching the starlight. She moved quietly, but he sensed her presence. "You are restless," she said, her voice softer than before. Daniel turned. "I do not understand. He had brothers, allies, even soldiers. Why me? Why give me the fortune? And you?" She looked away, her hands tightening against the rail. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then she spoke, her voice trembling though she tried to keep it strong. "Because he knew he was going to die." Daniel's breath caught. He stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Her eyes darkened. "My husband did not die by accident. He was murdered. Poison slipped into his wine. A knife in the shadows. I warned him. I begged him to be careful. But he said it was too late. He knew his enemies were already moving. That is why he made the will. That is why he chose you." The words struck Daniel like thunder. His chest tightened. His friend had known. He had seen death coming and still smiled. Still planned. And he had chosen Daniel. Not his own blood. "Why me?" Daniel whispered again, almost pleading. The widow turned to him, her eyes wet but blazing with fire. "Because he trusted you more than anyone. You saved him once, and he never forgot. He said a human heart is pure, free from the greed of our kind. He believed only you would protect me, not use me." Her voice broke at the last word. Daniel felt a weight settle on his shoulders heavier than any sword. His friend's death was not chance. It was a plan, a trap, and now the enemies would stop at nothing to finish what they had started. Daniel stepped closer. "Who killed him?" She shook her head. "I do not know, but they are close. They are inside these walls. Every smile hides a blade. Every gift carries poison. That is why I did not trust you. That is why I thought you were part of it." Daniel's heart sank. He understood now her coldness, her suspicion. She was not only grieving. She was hunted, alone, betrayed by her own people. For the first time, Daniel saw the pain behind her strength. He placed his hand on the rail, his voice steady though his heart trembled. "I will not let them take you. Not while I breathe. Not while I live." Her eyes softened, her lips parting as if to speak. But before she could, a loud crash echoed through the palace. Guards shouted. The sound of weapons clashing filled the air. Daniel's hand instinctively went to the blade at his side. The widow's face turned pale. "They come again," she whispered. But this attack was different. It was not shadows or assassins. It was soldiers, dozens of them, armored and armed. They stormed the palace gates, banners of a rival lord flying high. The traitor had revealed himself. Daniel rushed with the widow through hidden corridors, guided by loyal guards. The sounds of battle grew louder, the walls shaking from explosions. The widow stopped suddenly, her eyes wide with shock. In the dark hallway stood one of her closest advisors, a man who had served her husband for years. His blade was drawn, and his smile was cold. "You should not have trusted the human," the traitor sneered. "The fortune belongs to us, not to an outsider. Tonight, it ends." Daniel stepped forward, his blade ready, his voice fierce. "If you want her, you go through me." The widow's heart pounded as she looked between them. The truth was revealed. The murder, the betrayal, the enemy within, and now Daniel stood as the only shield between her and death. Her late husband's choice echoed like thunder. Only a human's heart could protect her. Only Daniel could face the shadows without fear of corruption. As the soldiers closed in, Daniel tightened his grip, his voice calm. "Stay behind me," the widow whispered, almost to herself. He was right. And then the clash began again. Blood and fire filling the halls. The clash of blades rang through the palace corridors. Sparks burst with every strike. Daniel fought with the strength of desperation. His arms burned, his lungs ached, but he refused to step back. The widow stayed behind him. Her eyes locked on the traitor who once served her husband with loyalty. Now that same man stood with enemies, his smile cruel. "You cannot protect her, human?" The traitor spat as he swung his blade. "You are weak. You are not one of us." Daniel blocked the strike, the shock running up his arm. He gritted his teeth. "Maybe I am not one of you, but that is why I will never betray her." His counterattack pushed the traitor back, sparks lighting the hall. The widow's guards tried to hold off the invading soldiers, but they were outnumbered. One by one they fell, the air filling with cries of pain and the stench of smoke. Daniel knew the palace would not hold. He needed to get her out, but she refused to move. "This is my home," she said, her voice strong though her hands trembled. "If I leave, I lose everything. If I stay, I may die, but I cannot run." Daniel turned to her, his heart torn. "You will die if you stay. Your husband trusted me to keep you safe, not to let you fall with these walls." Her eyes met his, full of fire and sorrow. "And what of you, Daniel, if you die for me, who will protect his legacy?" For a moment, the battle faded from his mind. He saw only her, standing proud yet broken, trapped between duty and survival. His chest tightened. He realized his feelings had changed. She was no longer just his friend's widow. She was a woman who had captured his heart without meaning to, but he could not tell her. Not now. Not when death was so close. The traitor lunged again, forcing Daniel back into the fight. Their blades clashed again and again. Each strike louder than the last. Daniel's arms shook. His body screamed, but he refused to yield. Finally, with a desperate push, he struck the traitor's blade aside and drove his own into the man's chest. The traitor gasped, eyes wide, before collapsing to the floor. The widow's breath caught. She had seen death before, but never like this. Never with a human standing as her shield. Her voice trembled. "You should not have been forced into this. This is not your war." Daniel wiped the blood from his blade, his voice rough. "It became my war the moment they came for you." The surviving soldiers retreated, dragging their wounded with them. The palace lay in ruins, smoke rising through shattered windows. Daniel leaned heavily against the wall, his body barely holding together. The widow stepped closer, her hand reaching for his shoulder. For the first time, she touched him without hesitation. "You saved me again," she whispered. "And you did not have to." Daniel met her eyes, his voice low. "I had to. I promised him, and now, I would do it for you." Her lips parted slightly, her breath unsteady. She turned away quickly, hiding the storm in her heart. She could not allow herself to feel this. Not for him. Not for her husband's friend. Yet her heart betrayed her, beating faster when he stood close. That night, the palace was silent. The dead were carried away. The fires slowly died. Daniel stood guard outside the widow's chamber, his blade at his side. His body longed for rest, but his mind refused to sleep. Inside her chamber, the widow sat by the window, her eyes staring at the stars. She whispered softly to herself. Why did he choose him? Was it only trust, or did he see something I could not? Her thoughts drifted back to Daniel's face, his stubborn courage, his quiet strength. She hated that he was human, hated that he was not of her kind, but more than that, she hated the way her heart trembled when he looked at her. The days turned into weeks. Daniel continued to train, to fight, to bleed for her. With every passing moment, their bond grew, not by choice but by fire and battle. Yet neither spoke of it, both trapped by duty, by the memory of the man who had brought them together. But the enemies outside did not sleep. The bounty grew higher, rumors spread faster, and now whispers reached even Daniel's ears. Some said the widow herself was cursed, that anyone tied to her would fall. Others said the human was no heir but a thief. The colony grew restless, and betrayal waited in every corner. One evening, as the suns dipped below the sea, the widow came to him, her face pale, her voice steady. "They will not stop, Daniel. If you stay with me, you will die. If you leave, you may live. Do not tie your life to mine. It is not fair to you." Daniel looked at her, his voice quiet but firm. "My life stopped being mine the day he gave me his last wish. You are not my burden. You are my duty, and maybe you are more than that." Her breath caught, her heart pounding. She wanted to speak, to ask what he meant. But before she could, a horn echoed across the night. The sound of war. Enemies were marching again, stronger, fiercer. And this time, Daniel knew. The fight would not be for inheritance or honor. It would be for survival, for love, for everything. And as the widow looked at him, her heart torn between grief and forbidden hope, she realized one truth. Her husband's choice was not only about trust, it was about destiny. The sound of war drums shook the night. Horns echoed across the alien city as enemy banners rose high. Their armies surrounded the palace like waves of fire. Torches burned, weapons gleamed, and voices roared with hunger for blood. Daniel stood at the gates, his blade in hand, his body weary but unbroken. The widow stood beside him, her silver gown replaced by armor of black and gold. She looked every bit the queen she was, proud, fierce. Yet her eyes betrayed the storm inside. She turned to him, her voice steady though her heart trembled. "This is their final strike. If we fall tonight, everything ends." Daniel nodded. "Then we don't fall." The gates burst open, and the battle began. Soldiers stormed the courtyard, their cries filling the air. Daniel charged forward with the guards, his blade flashing in the firelight. He fought with every ounce of strength left in him, each swing fueled by a promise that burned brighter than pain. The widow commanded her people, her voice carrying like thunder. Stand, fight, protect the will. Her presence lit a fire in their hearts. They rallied around her, forming a wall of steel. Daniel fought at her side, his movements no longer clumsy. His training and his will had turned him into something more. The enemy pressed harder, their numbers overwhelming. For every soldier that fell, two more seemed to rise. Daniel's arms ached, his body screamed, but he refused to break. He saw the widow surrounded, blades closing in on her, without thought. He threw himself between her and death, his blade cut through the air, his body shielding hers. Blood spilled, but not hers. She looked at him in shock, her voice shaking. "Why? Why would you risk everything for me?" His breath came heavy, his voice raw. "Because I promised him. Because you are worth more than this war. Because you are not just his widow, you are you." Her heart stopped for a moment, her eyes filled with something she had not allowed herself to feel. Hope. The enemy leader stepped forward, clad in crimson armor, his voice cold. "You are a fool human. You think you can protect her. You think you can keep what does not belong to you. Tonight you both die." Daniel raised his blade, his body trembling but his spirit burning. "If I die keeping my word. If I fall standing." The battle raged on, sparks of steel, fire in the skies. The palace shook, walls crumbling. Yet Daniel stood unyielding. His heart drove him where his body should have failed. The widow fought beside him, their blades striking as one. For the first time, she no longer looked at him as an outsider. She looked at him as her shield, her partner. At last, Daniel clashed with the enemy leader. Their blades met with deafening force. The fight was brutal, every strike tearing through his strength. But Daniel's will was stronger. With a final desperate swing, he struck true. The enemy leader fell, silence sweeping across the battlefield. The remaining soldiers hesitated, their courage broken. Then, one by one, they fled into the night. The palace stood, battered but unbroken. Daniel collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged. The widow rushed to him, kneeling at his side. Her hand touched his face, trembling. "You did it. You saved me. You saved us all." Daniel smiled faintly. "Not me. Us, we did it together." Her eyes softened, tears glimmering. For the first time, She allowed her heart to speak. He was right. My husband was right to trust you. You are not just the heir, you are the protector, and more than that, you are mine. The words hung in the air, heavier than any vow. Daniel's heart surged. He had carried a promise, fought through shadows, and faced death itself. Now, at last, he understood. This inheritance was never about wealth or power. It was about her. The widow helped him to his feet. Together they walked through the ruins of the palace. The people bowed as they passed, voices rising in unison, calling his name. For the first time, the colony accepted the human as one of their own. Not because of the will, but because he had earned it. As dawn broke, the suns rose over the horizon, casting golden light across the battered city. Daniel stood at the balcony with the widow by his side. His heart no longer restless. His path was clear. He was not just a friend honoring a promise. He was the human heir, chosen not by chance but by destiny. And as the widow leaned closer, whispering softly, Daniel knew the truth. His friend had seen what neither of them had, that love, loyalty, and strength were not bound by blood or species, but by the courage of the human heart.